the odd phases that we saw last time in pick and ban, or do you think it's going to be more normal?
We're already a little more standard with the Jace ban coming out here for PSG, not wanting to Smitty J to get that. Ooh, and actually cutting away what would likely be a first rotation Shen here, so PSG putting high priority against Smitty J.
Schalke likely going to stick to their Rengar and LeBlanc bans. In the past, even when they were on red side, they actually left LeBlanc through, and they picked Malzahar. And LeBlanc made it all the way through the draft. No one actually picked that one up. And there was that one LeBlanc game last week where he got heavily punished by the Kazakhs. We saw it again happen today. And it clearly is a pick that teams are used to, right? They definitely have answers to it, at least here in the challenger scene. But for the time being, it looks like they're going to stick to more maps.
So Varus here is what I kind of would expect. They shied away from Ivan when available, and we've gone back to 2016 because that's a first pick Maokai in a 10-ban system. When Rumble is available, okay, PSG is saying they want a team fight, one pick in.
Well, you have to assume that they are relying on the fact that Schalke will prioritize the Varus and maybe even the Zyra, which will enable PSG a bit more freedom. But I'm very surprised that you would go for such an early rotation Maokai, especially when you can't get your mid laner early on in the first rotation of the second phase, right? Because Schalke will get that for themselves. I think that if you are PSG, you're putting yourselves in a tricky position because you're going to look to early rotate your mid and top, and that's going to give Schalke the opportunity to counterpick.
What is it with the strong impetus we're seeing for Lee Sin and Jhin this week? Because a lot of the time, if Varus is left open, we're seeing Varus as a first pick on the red side, usually. That's what it's been like for the last couple of weeks. But now, it seems to be Jhin, and there seems to be a lot more Lee Sin.
So Jhin is a lot more to do with that longer range team fighting. Obviously very good with the lethality and the buffs that came through on the itemization.
Good laner too, just to make things even more impactful.
Yeah, exactly. And then the Lee Sin on top of it. I mean, Lulex is a known Lee Sin player, so he's one of the people that we would expect to take that up. You know, it's got a decent early game, can take most jungle matchups. The effect that wears off later actually isn't so significant anymore. A lot of junglers have that same kind of difficulty, but as we go through, no jungle focus yet from PSG. Ryze has come out for the mid lane alongside that Maokai, so the same type of setup for PSG perhaps as the last game if they do end up getting Sivir.
If you're Schalke now though, I'd be surprised if you went for a Zyra once again, because you're going to be in a similar situation to what you had in game 1, where you just get pushed into your turret all day. Whereas, unless Schalke decide to actually ban away the Sivir now, because remember, they can look to pinch AD carries, you could ban away the Sivir and the Varus, forcing PSG onto something like a Caitlyn. It would still give you a fair amount of pressure and poke in the early game, but your engage tools would be significantly mitigated.
Yeah, and as we look at this, Karma likely going to the support role, so they won't be banning out anything like Misfortune at this point. They're looking towards the jungle to take that away, trying to take out a farming matchup from PSG.
It makes sense as well, though, because you've already got the Rengar ban, you've already got the Kazakhs ban, put a Graves and an Ivern ban on top of that, and you're really falling down to that second tier of junglers.
Remember, we did see a Warwick ban in game 1 come out from Schalke, head towards Kire. He did hover it for a little while. Not sure if that was a troll or whether or not that was maybe I should lock it in right now. But it looks like the Schalke are going to continue with their respect, so we won't be seeing any of the furry friend in the jungle for today. A lot of emphasis once again on this Katarina ban, taking it away from Selfie. We saw that earlier on today as well from CosQ, where it definitely seemed to have a lot of assassin-style players, and it fits in Selfie's aggressive nature.
I think we saw him play it last week as well, didn't we? Got a head, got a double kill really early on, and the double buff. So it is definitely in his nature and gives you a little bit more versatility as well in that lane.
Fiora was taken off the board as well for that top lane, which means we're left on a tank v tank matchup. So Nautilus is the pick. So obviously we'll be able to push fairly heavily, at least for the early game into Steve. So looking at now what PSG end up going for the rest of their lineup. We're going to have the jungle and AD carry here.
Yeah, Olaf is still available in the jungle and very strong if used correctly, can get on towards that backline pretty well. And you've got the Realm Warp and the Maokai there to help you out, trying to like dive on towards that backline.
This is very much more of a team fighting composition compared to last game, because the slight issue with the teamfight composition that they had in game 1 was the Shen. He doesn't have the most utility in teamfights, whereas Maokai really compensates for that. So you can see that they're going to be looking to force fights around the mid game, something that they were successfully able to do in game 1, It's just that Baron that we've highlighted many a time that really fell things through for them. But going for a very similar style, it does seem that coordination and teamwork is the name of the game for PSG.
Schalke on the other side, though, picking up the Talia as a last pick here, looking to kind of snowball bot lane by the looks of it, looking for a bot lane party. Nautilus comes down with a TP, Talia comes as well, and you just have Malzahar flashing in. You know, find somebody at level 6, catch them out. It's kind of difficult to lock down Pilot and Sprattle if they can get the ultimates out, start creating some distance. So this should be a very interesting set of fights as we reach level 6 and past that for Vanda.
The ability to lock one person down from Schalke is ungodly, though. You look at it, they've got the Nautilus there, they've got the Nether Grasp, they've got Jhin with the Deadly Flourish. There's so much long-range catch. And if they can catch one member out, then they can start to break away at the PSG team fighting machine.
And what I'm excited more for is actually the early game presence from the jungler, right? We praised him last week for his early game snowball on the Kha'Zix, but this week Lulex will be getting his hands on the Lee Sin. That was even respect banned away from him in week 1, and now he gets his hands on it once again. We've seen some great Lee Sin already today from Tabasco. Typically, in professional play, Lee Sin actually doesn't have that much success, but it looks like that the challenger teams are making it work for themselves.
I think a lot of that is just being able to make catches and snowball the game from there as well. That's where Lee Sin really thrives. Especially in LCS level, you tend to see slower early games with a little bit more circumspect thought.
And you're all forgetting Cacao from last week.
Well, that's true, but that's Misfits.
That's very true.
Misfits of a challenger team.
Lee Sin doesn't have the impact. Cacao comes along. I mean, laughing in his chair.
Yeah, that's very true. Lee Sin can definitely have a big impact. I mean, earlier today, I saw Clid over in the
LPL.
LPL, yeah. That was an impressive late game Lee Sin for sure.
Clid, not Cled.
Clid, yes. But moving back to today's game, again, we have to highlight what this actually means for the overall standings in the group, because remember that Schalke have already taken the first game in this series. It is only a best of 2, so the best that PSG can hope for is a 1-1, which would be great against a team like PSG. You don't want them to get another 3 points on the board and start separating themselves from the rest of the pack, and you want to get on the board yourself.
Sadly, we don't have penalties at the end of it.
No,
so
we do not.
No coin flipping.
No way to break the tie.
Wins. No, I
Sometimes
know.
they have to play again in a few weeks' time, maybe in the playoffs. You never know. Although with this performance thus far from PSG, they've got a lot of ground to make back up. Because you already you're a few points behind. All it takes is one more loss, and really you're at the bottom of the table.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this second game, and I think it should be hype.
It will be hype, Vedius. Thank you for leading me into that. It is the second half of this series between Schalke 04 and PSG. 1-0 up for Schalke. Can PSG equalize?
Yeah, looking to see if they can even up the score. Of course, for these organizations, this is a pretty standout matchup when you look for it. If you can get a 2-0 against the other football club in the league, that's a pretty nice thing to just
bragging rights
for your first split in Challenger.
It's just bragging rights, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's, if you beat a close opponent, it's great to have those bragging rights, and you guys have experienced that recently.
So Vanda looking in this bottom lane, obviously pushing up, just trying to see if Sprattle comes forward and if you can just catch him out with some damage. We've seen people lose half their health to Malzahar at level 1.
Oh yeah.
If you walk into the wrong spot, so Sprattle has to be careful.
So of course, pre-nerf, we're still on 7.2, so it's before the changes to the Voidlings and to the extra damage coming out from Malzahar, which is important, mostly because Malzahar is still that dominant, disruptive threat in the bottom lane.
He was banned out in game 1, but now that Vanda has his hands on him, I'm looking forward to seeing what he could do, because remember that in game 1, both Pilot and Sprattle had full control over this lane, constantly shoving their opponents under the tower, and I think it's going to be a very similar situation compared to what we saw in game 1. The big difference, though, again, is this jungler in Lulex. He is on the Lee Sin. When you push that aggressively on the bottom lane of Akama and Sivir, all you need is that flash ultimate from the Malzahar, the Lee Sin comes in, you get kicked underneath your turret, and all of a sudden that lane swings in Schalke's favor. So
you think there's going to be a lot of bot lane priority probably from Selfie with the Weaver's Wall, probably from Lulex as well. Kirei needs to find a way to answer that, especially around that level 6 when Schalke can go for the big dives.
As you already said, it's about that level 6 mark where we'll see more of this. For the time being, Schalke are just going to have to struggle, do what they can to farm through the pressure that Pilot and Sprattle will be exerting. And it also relies on Selfie not falling behind in the mid lane. The thing that you have to be careful of as a Talia is the possibility of a gank. Remember that Rise can lock you up with his Rune Prison. You get the flank in from the Olaf. There's more than enough damage between those two to kill a very squishy Talia in the early game. If she doesn't have pressure, she can't look to roam. Yeah,
she's looking to just get vision control for now, coming down out of the lane after pushing it. Trying to just see if Olaf is on Raptors. He wasn't. He's already on his red, so has made his way over. But that just gives enough information. You can see also Sprattle coming over just to defend in case there was a play from Selfie onto that red buff. So Lulex, he's going to get Scuttle Crab. Not really going to be able to do too much, but right now it's a fairly slow start for both junglers. We're not yet at the point where they'd be expected in lanes.
We talked a lot about the impact of Lulex in the fight. How does Kirei work in here? He's very strong in teamfights, can get on towards that backline pretty well, and will be running up towards upset. But before then, is he actually going to be able to impact anything? And if this ends up being a 1-3-1 coming out from Schalke, what's his role then?
So Kirei still has a fair amount of trading potential. If Blank and Kirei catch somebody fairly early on, there is a lot of damage coming through. So that's his early game focus. As you said, though, later on, he's going to run an upset. He's going to run right past Vander, who's not going to be able to do anything to stop him, and run right onto the AD carry and try and take him down.
I think his greatest strength is the fact that he does fantastically against low mobility champions. And when you look at Talia and Jhin, they are prime examples of low mobility champions, as Steve experiencing a very similar thing to what we saw in the Maokai versus Nautilus earlier on in the day. Misfits Academy really was struggling in this 1-versus-1. But tracking back to our Olaf discussion earlier on, the thing that concerns me the most for Kirei is that Selfie's ultimate, he can't flash over or get around. That wall can be a big hindrance of this Olaf as he looks for a potential gang top.
SmittyJ realizing as well that Kirei was on the top side of the map, decides to get away. It's a strong ward there, you know, and SmittyJ will be happy enough just to back. In fact, if he can save his teleport here, it allows them to perhaps try and make that play before 6, although it's perhaps not exactly what you want to be doing, so he decides to use it anyway.
And as soon as SmittyJ is pushing up in that lane, the ward goes down, saves his life, TP's back into lane with a good advantage for himself, and that Dark Seal start as the first item, at least, coming back from the first recall from SmittyJ, is kind of what we've seen a lot of top laners do. Maokai does it from time to time as well. If you're in a position where you really don't anticipate dying, it amplifies that potions, it gives you a little bit of AP, and if you're snowballing heavy enough, Magi is later maybe, who knows. But generally, you just sit on it with 10 stacks and don't die.
Yep. It synergizes really nicely with Corrupting Potion too, as you were just mentioning. And it makes your trading
Sprattle! Voidlings are chasing, they're swarming, it's the Zerg! Sprattle escapes.
Uses the movement speed bonus from his shield to disengage from the Voidlings, just barely able to escape. Something that you always have to respect from the Malzahar, and this is the big difference that we saw earlier on. The Zyra, if she catches you, doesn't quite have the all-in potential, whereas Malzahar pre-6 definitely does, and you're seeing it right there as Sprattle gets forced back.
That's the power of it, though. But PSG are continuing to push up this lane. Said Lulex might have a bit of focus down towards the bottom lane. Looks like he's just power farming to that 6 so that he can play those insect mechanics. Kirei was down here as well, still sitting in that bush, maybe hoping that Schalke overextend as they push the wave back out. But Schalke have been pretty safe thus far in this lane. Happy enough just to push the wave out when it gets to turret. Here goes Kirei though, Upset's low, has to heal, exhaust used, and the flash. Sprattle flashes in, Upset's actually in a world of hurt. Here is Kirei, gets first blood.
Really good gank from Kirei to punish the low mobility on Jace as Lulex now making his way down to the bottom lane.
Here comes the Weaver's Wall.
Weaver's Wall, Pilot flashes away, Sprattle sacrifices himself, Selfie gets the kill. But it's a 1-for-1 trade at the end of the day.
And from Sprattle flashing in to secure the lockdown with the chains, ends up dying from it, and Schalke can maybe even look to turn here for a fairly early Infernal Drake if they want it. I mean, as we look back at how this first fight started, it looked like Vander was looking to try and get on to Pilot, perhaps.
And you can see how effective Kirei is against these low mobility champions, where the moment their flash is down, he just continues to land axe after axe. But as you mentioned, Stress, the flash from Sprattle had already been used earlier. Lulex ward jumps in to cut off the escape route of Sprattle, and that enables Schalke to pick themselves up a return kill off the back of that first blood.
Perhaps a little bit more action than we were expecting before the 6-minute mark, but Kirei was able to sneak himself in, so did get the gank off. A slight gold lead as well extended for Schalke and Nullfair. It's only 200. But every little counts early on, and a lot of that has to look up towards the top lane, where there's almost a 10 CS advantage for SmittyJ.
It's not a massive lead right now, but you can see SmittyJ kind of trying to out-trade against Steve, just trying to trade some of his health potion stacks away, but Schalke looking for the Dragon. The real gain that Kyrie is feeling from that kill is the fact that he gets fairly quick lucidity boots, gets the more axes, ghost cooldown, and all that good stuff available for him. So it's still net gain for Schalke, though, right? With the Infernal.
Well, the thing that concerns me for PSG is that their team composition is very much based on team fighting, right? So getting that Infernal Drake will enable you to scale very nicely with the Infernal. However, for Schalke, they're pretty reliant on having successful lanes. They're doing a good job in the top lane. Mid lane has the ability to push and roam, which we've already started to see from Selfie. And as long as they have priority, that's where you can look to punish the weaker laning part of PSG. Because so far, Blanc has been pushing it fairly consistently. Pyla's been pushing it fairly consistently. He now has no flash or heal, so Schalke could look to try and turn that into something which is just made even worse through the impact of the Infernal Drake.
And now we're starting to look towards that level 6 mark that we were waiting for as well. Nethergrasp on Vander. Upset will have that curtain call. TP is almost up for Smitty J. Expect some action in that bottom lane soon.
And that's if they can establish vision control here. One thing you'll probably see PSG, if they have time to recall, since Spreadle has no wards, they need to refill his Sightstone and get a control ward off their recall so that they can control ward their own brush in the bottom side. Otherwise, the ward that currently Spreadle is sat on is going to really bite them, because that's where Smitty J will appear. It's difficult. Smitty J, Spreadle, like... It's difficult. Different languages are difficult.
I mean, it's all English.
Just try speaking Welsh.
So, looking back at how the teams have done so far, we've seen a bit of early aggression from Lulex. The initial gank did come out from Kirei, but Lulex is yet to really start a snowball on any of his lanes. The fact that Selfie has gotten a kill should enable him to play a little bit more aggressively, but Blank's doing a good job of matching his items. Picking himself up the Catalyst combined with the Tier will mean that, hey, he might not have kill pressure onto the Talia, but at least he can match in terms of items, and it should, for the time being, still be good for Blank because he's free to scale up. He's not under any threat of being all in. He's been playing fairly reserved, but that could change if Vander looks for a rogue.
Vander coming up towards the mid lane. That Flash Nethergrasp is always an opportunity. Flash not quite off cooldown yet, but it's all about vision control at the moment. It's all about setting up those wards, understanding where you need to be and where the enemy wants you to be as well. We see PSG perhaps setting up for something in the bottom lane.
Yeah, looking for something bot side. They know there's a ward in Tribush, and they can see Lulex now roaming down as well. So they're aware that Schalke can respond, and that's why PSG, they're looking to move up to actually meet Lulex as he's coming through. Blanc, oh, they kind of miss each other.
Missed the Sonic Wave, but Selfie gets him down. The Dragon's Edge, he flashes away, he manages to survive. Now Lulex getting chased down by Kare. He'll take him out. Smitty J tried to join the fight. He does land the hook on towards Kyrie. Blank coming back in. Steve was there, and Pilot takes the kill. PSG collapse. Steve, however, is still in the midst of this. The Nethergrasp down. Vander low. Pilot chasing in. He wants this. He wants to kill Kyrie. Getting chased out by Selfie. The curtains have opened, and Selfie picks up the jungler. Steve's going to fall as well. It's a double for the Talia.
It completely turns around because Schalke finally managed to regroup around the fight. It looked like PSG were using this power of the Olaf early on, the strength of just getting a few low health targets and taking them out. But then PSG kind of overstay. They really stay too long, and Schalke can turn it back around. The curtain call was available. Upset joins the fight. Vander joined the fight as well. And it was enough to turn it back in their favor.
The overstay is too right as Lulex sets off the initial misplay because he can't actually join onto the side of Blank, which would have been a very clean kill. And that would have not resulted in Lulex needing to flash. So not only does the Rise get away, but PSG get themselves a kill. They now have the numbers advantage too, and Schalke have lost. At this point, you disengage if you're PSG. Don't care if Vander uses his ultimate here. I don't care if he looks like a juicy target, you just back off. This was a big misplay from Steve. Too many resources were used to try and keep him alive. And then Kyrie making a similar mistake. Trying to get the chase down onto Selfie, who on a Talia is born to kite. She is so good at just making her way backwards with the worked ground, combined with the Q. It is nearly impossible for an Olaf without the Ghost, without the ult, to be able to get the collapse. And it was just a big misplay from PSG, overstaying their welcome.
3-0-0 on Natalia now, and a Morello Nomicon completed. Rod of Ages on blank though, so he is starting to get that scale rolling alongside the tier. Pilot with a good spell shield just to stop the engage from Smitty J, and now PSG are focusing up towards the top side. Lulex! You're a squishy man at the moment as Kyrie takes him, chunks him out.
And this is interesting out of PSG. Although they weren't losing the bot lane, they're the ones that have swapped up out of this. They're defending with Steve on the bottom side. Smitty J does have his TP available if anything ends up kicking off, because here comes Selfie. So Schalke make the play bottom side in response. And PSG had actually recalled out from top side. And going back topside?
Yeah,
really
I don't know. I actually don't understand what PSG is doing right now, because while the rotation top, in a sense, could work out, because you could end up taking that early tower, maybe you get a dive onto Smitty J, there was no need for them to actually move away from that bottom lane. They were winning it pretty convincingly. There was always the risk of Selfie coming in for a roam bot, but with good vision control around the bottom river and with good pressure from Blanc, that shouldn't have necessarily been a bigger issue than it was at level 6, right? So I feel like the PSG were a little bit preemptive, and they're actually going to end up losing a tower sooner than they're going to get it.
And one thing that's kind of strange from that is PSG did kind of get some of Schalke's roam potential, the Talia ultimate that comes down to the bottom lane. But you're right, like, Pilot goes back to the top lane, can't actually push it. Now Spraddle's caught.
Yeah, Lulex goes for the chase. The curtain call from Upset as well. Great kick back, but Steve will tank up the shot. Blank is in from the side. Lulex will be the first to fall in this fight, and Blank will be the second. 1-for-1 trade thus far. Schalke perhaps looking to continue the engage. They have got a low turret down here, and it looks actually like they're just going to go for the tower.
It confuses me why Blank decided to take that Rise ultimate, because it could have been used as just a zoning tool initially to just force the rest of Schalke to be aware of a possible Rise collapse, because Lulex was going to die. He overcommitted to a play. He didn't realize that 3 members were there to get the collapse down onto Lulex as he overcommits here. And look, this Rise ultimate would have been fine as a zoning tool, but instead he goes straight on to the Malzahar. He gets locked up. He ends up getting collapsed upon. And this could have just been a clean kill for PSG, and instead it ends up being a 1-for-1.
And look at where Pilot was during that entire thing. He came from top side to mid and then sits there, isn't actually pushing out, can't do anything. I'm really confused by the team's utilization of Pilot over the last 2 to 3 minutes, because he went top side, recalled, went top side, walked to mid, didn't do anything, just pushed a wave out. And whereas Schalke group on bot side, bring the Talia down, get the kills, get the tower kill, and they're in a great spot.
My only thought is maybe they're trying to funnel farm onto Pilot so he can get to the point where he clears pretty effectively, because they know they're behind, so all they want to do is stand underneath their turret, clear the wave out, and then wait until they get towards those later stages.
Well, that doesn't make any sense, because you can get farm bot. He's been getting farm bot throughout the entire game. Look, he still has a CS lead, even though he ended up having to do an improper backup in top lane. They ended up just losing the tower bottom. Now you've actually got Schalke setting up what is effectively a pseudo 1-3-1, because you have the TP from the Nautilus, you have the Weaver's Wall from Selfie.
It's a separated on the hunt as well there, used. That was a little bit odd, going for the on the hunt straight into a wall, sort of like face planting straight into it.
That was, this last few minutes has been a bit of a strange decision-making setup. But as we settle ourselves, you're talking about how they're trying to get farm on the Civet, trying to, get to a point where they're stronger. Well, PSG in the last game were at a real good point with the Rise, with the Civet, and they actually kind of backfired on a couple of fights. So at this point, if they get to that spot, maybe PSG can hold on. But Schalke had a great turnaround.
I think you have to remember as well, we've talked about this time and time again, PSG's early game tends to be strong. Their mid and late game in their decision making is what has been letting them down. It was Baron in the last games, it was last week, it was just general teamfight presence, and here we see an example of that once again.
The thing is, right now, they're actually in a pretty good spot to try and force a team fight. This Dragon could be a point of contention for them, but instead they're just going to let it go. They're afraid that the Civet, only having completed the Essence Reaver without that second item, might not be a strong team fighting tool. Selfie having completed already the Morello Nomicon, and I believe working towards that Rylai's Crystal Scepter, could be a big turning point for Schalke, where they're actually the ones that are stronger in these fights.
Yeah, and that's a difficulty, because the kills early on for PSG went to Kyrie, and that should theoretically be a good thing, but if they can never actually get the fight started, if you can't get the Olaf on top of the Jhin, if Jhin is never setting up curtain call, then, I mean, it's so tough to utilize these 3 kills from PSG.
The big thing, though, that I feel that we really need to talk about is how game-changing a champion like Maokai can be. Because I think back to the Fnatic game that we saw against Vitality earlier on in the week, and they were down. They were down like 3-4k gold.
Yeah.
One flank TP from Maokai into a big team fight. All of a sudden, they were in full control. And this is something that PSG have available to them. It is so much harder for Schalke to execute their composition than it is to PSG. So all they need is to wait for Schalke to make one overstep, to commit to one wrong objective, to push just a little bit too far. The entire lineup of PSG collapse, and then all of a sudden they're in full control because Schalke have no way of team fighting this composition.
I think it speaks a lot to the mindset behind PSG as well. When you look at their compositions, they tend to... Today, they've been team-fighting compositions that work relatively easily and don't have so many like moving parts. So they play early game well, and then when they get to team fights, it's like, okay, we can do this pretty easily. We know everyone's individual defined roles, and it's simple. It feels to me like they are still working on themselves as a team. Now, Steve is going to get dived. Nethergrass comes out. Everyone is here. If Steve escapes this, he is an amazing player. I think he's just going to get called out still. Smitty J tanking up the turret. Lulex gets the kill. It was impossible for Steve to escape.
It took a while for Steve to die, but he kind of accepted his fate on that. But what are they doing on the map? What is the cross-map play? Well, they got Ryze pushing on the bot side. You've got Karma and Olaf looking for vision control on the bot side as well. But Pilot is in mid lane. Flash, but no Nethergrass available from Vander.
This response is so slow from PSG. It took them years to kill Steve. He still has his flash up. This guy was alive for so long that PSG literally could have built a house and lived in it for a week. Instead, they waste their time in the river, doing absolutely nothing. The best they're going to get is a tier 1 in the bottom lane. Schalke are able to shove the wave all the way up to the tier 2 in the top. PSG are now being forced away from this mid-tier 1. I'm confused with what PSG are doing, because game 1 they looked so clean, whereas in game 2 they just seem to be falling apart.
But you can see what Kyrie wants from this. They were looking at a team fight setup because of the TP positioning from Steve could have been great. Kyrie wants to go. They're running in, but Kyrie's half health already.
Blank is onto Vander though. He'll use teleport coming in. Lulex there. Weaver's wall comes down as well. Disengage the fight. PSG decide they don't want to continue for the moment. Smitty J tries to jump in, can't land the hook.
And again, everything is just a little slow from PSG. They could have just pulled the trigger on that teleport. Yes, okay, there's no home guard right now this early on in the game, but Steve still would have had a line into the back of the fight. But for now, they just are kind of stuck under their tower.
What is Steve doing right now? Because you can see he's trying to get some vision around behind. Yes, you have the ability to go for that flank engage, but no on the hunt available, no summoner spells for Blank, no Ragnarok available for Kirei. They missed their window of opportunity. They didn't pull the trigger, as you were saying, Stress, and now they're suffering for it. They may very well lose this tier 1 in the mids. At the very least, they've given up so much control over the jungle. Just look at the red side vision. Wards littered all over the top half of the map. Entrances lit up fought the side of Schalke. They just have so much control, which makes setting up for these next few objectives all the more easier.
And where's the ward line from PSG as well? Like, you can say they've lost vision, but they haven't put any new vision down. There's a control ward near top lane. There's nothing in the river, maybe 1 or 2 deep wards on the blue side of Schalke's jungle, but there's nothing spotting the rotations and the movement of Schalke from PSG.
It's really tough for PSG when they don't seem to be on the same page. They look like they're not quite working at the same speed, and that really, like, you can see Kyrie wanting to go forward for fights, wanting to get in there, but if nobody else is going with him, then he can't really do enough on his own, whereas Schalke are pretty unanimous that Selfie's going in with his ult. They're making the play ahead of time. They're not just playing in the moment.
They certainly are. However, you know, we've been giving a lot of criticism to PSG, but now I'm looking at the items that they have completed because they're working towards that 2-item spike. This is really where their teamfight comp starts to kick in, but maybe Schalke are not going to give them an opportunity.
They're going for the dive. Pilot caught out. Great play by Lulex. Kirei on the wrong side of that wall as well. Steve, however, does join the fight. Upsets tanking the turret. He's going to get forced away, and now Steve can re-engage. You've still got Blank. You've still got Spattle. You've still got Steve. He goes deep. He gets one. However, they retreat straight away. Blank still alive, gets hooked. Now he needs to try and play the fight of his life. He can't do it. Schalke take him down. 4-for-1.
Blank was so far in the backline that he couldn't catch up to Steve. Now Sprattle's under threat. Everybody else is around. That's
He walked into the flourish. Just step back. Step back, man.
Schalke in full control after PSG. Just, again, not really together on that play. Steve's going in. Where is Blank in that entire fight? His Realm Warp had been used. I want to see how far away from the fight he was, because there was low health members of Schalke all the way across the board, and they never got the damage down.
And I want to know how PSG had no knowledge of Selfie coming in from that flank. We talked about the vision control earlier on, but just look at how much freedom this Talia has. There is no wars to spot him out. The ultimate is so good that it just splits up the lineup of PSG, and as you rightly said, Blanc can't even get involved in this fight. It is so difficult for PSG to commit to an engage like this. And what's even worse, chase for it when you're forcing yourself into a choke point when Selfie's so good at kiting backwards, and Upset has so much damage to prevent you from getting the collapse.
And Smitty J just played blocker for the entire fight. Blanc had to just throw damage at the Nautilus, so despite him coming from the bot lane, getting blocked by a wall, he just got to the outskirts of the fight, but it wasn't enough. And here's... not the best out of Sprattle.
It's not a hard dodge either. You have to give credit to Upset though. Landed 2 great deadly flourishes in that fight. Caught one on towards Upset, right to on towards Blank side to catch him out, and then the final one. And Schalke's decision making is absolutely down to a T. They know exactly what they want to do. They know exactly when they want to do it, and PSG aren't reacting properly.
It's meant to be a tough week for PSG as an organization when you looked at it on paper. Having to face Schalke after a dominating performance here in Challenger. Later on this week, they have to face Barcelona in, I believe, it's the Champions League.
It is.
That's 2 teams you probably don't want to face in their respective leagues. So Schalke looking to collapse up into the top side onto Kyrie right now.
Lulex decides he doesn't want to go too far onto that. Depth charge coming out. Here comes the Weaver's Wall. 3 members of PSG split. Realm Warp though, they try and get into it. Smitty J stops it. Blank's dead. Kaire's dead. Sprattle is by himself on this side of the wall. Schalke going to continue with the pressure, continue with the kills, continue with the domination. And Pilot now, why were you that far up? The rest of your team is dead. He uses the spell shield, but Vander says, oh, no you don't. Exhaust, dead once again. Schalke take down 4.
Clean collapse from Schalke, and off the back of that they can make a swift rotation round to the Baron. If you want this big purple worm, that is how you secure it. Clean execution, and Schalke with a decisive performance. Really impressive wall from Selfie to cut off the escape, and we just have to think, what were PSG thinking? Why do you want to commit to that tower? What about all of this collapse that you were playing so carefully around in the early game?
Exactly, and Blanc and Kyrie, they were looking for this tower, pushing way too far up. Look how far away Pilot is. I mean, Selfie completely cuts off the exit path. Beautiful knockups, and Chain CC just completely shuts out PSG from the rest of this fight. And Pilot,
and now
why
Pilot
are you coming
comes.
in, Pilot? Why suddenly?
I'm here to save the day! To only then get collapsed on by the rest of Schalke. Nice flash from Vander, just displaying his dominance, not allowing him to escape from his death. And now with the Baron buff on top of Schalke, you have to wonder how PSG are going to be able to come back, because so many times we praise their composition for its ability to team fight, yet we have not seen PSG's full 5-on-5 team fight because of how much they've split up their team.
Yeah, they've completely split up. Now they're going to get split up because Smitty J down on the bot side with a Baron buff is going to push in that Maokai. Will try and just whittle it down over time. Talia on the top side is going to do the same thing. Weaver's Wall's going to stretch enough to mid lane if they need Selfie there in an instant. So Schalke are just going to push all day. And I don't really think PSG can slow them down too much. Only the lane that Pilot is going to be in is the one that should be able to sustain.
From this performance today, Schalke have definitely concreted themselves in my mind as the top team in Challenger Series. And if they play this well and they work the map as well as they have done here, they are definitely in contention with an LCS spot next split. They are so strong.
A part of me feels, though, that a lot of the success from Schalke has come from the mistakes of PSG. Yeah. I wonder about those early map movements from PSG. They had a good understanding of what they needed to do, which was just farm, right? Just farm, push, farm, push, farm, push. Wait to the mid game, force fights around these objectives. If you lose a tower here or there, it's not the biggest problem, but it should be Schalke trying to force those plays. And because PSG did, it just gave Schalke the freedom to do whatever they want.
And that's where I think Lulex on an active jungler works so much better. The Ivan was solid, But honestly, they're setting up plays, they're starting plays, and Schalke are looking to push in.
And looking for this inhibitor tower in the bot lane. Kyrie caught out, now the grasp onto Steve as well. He's low, the Malco, the tree is almost dead. He's fallen now. PSG 4v5 trying to defend. The curtain comes down, Blanc. Solo has to retreat. Pilot getting sniped away by Selfie, flashes in. Can't land the final threaded volley. Sprattle knocked back. PSG knocked for 6, and they are all falling to pieces. Schalke closing this one out. Only Kyrie left alive, and you have to think this is Schalke blowing the final whistle on PSG.
They think it's all over. Well, it is now, because Schalke are closing in on a 2-0 victory.
Superb play by Schalke 04 today. Absolutely dominant. They're going to take it 2-0 over Paris Saint-Germain.
Cementing themselves as #1 in the Challenger Series so far, getting themselves 2 convincing 2-0s. Definitely earlier on in the day, looking a little bit shaky, given how well PSG played their early game. Nevertheless, they were able to bring it back. Game 2, they were given a lot more freedom, and you see what happens when you give a team like Schalke an ever so slight edge, because they just run away with it.
And Lulex, in the early game, we were talking about it, difference between jungle styles, look way more comfortable on this setup, and
Certainly
Schalke
did.
look very scary when they're playing like this. Game 1, they had their questionable decisions, so
A
did
large
PSG.
part of it comes down to draft as
Yeah.
well. When we debated about the Ori versus Corki, perhaps they could have gone for a slightly stronger draft. Nevertheless, they did make it work, and you can see in Game 2, as you rightly said, when they seem to have a little bit more comfort, and when their composition as a whole makes a little bit more sense in terms of its completion, its absolute 5-man unit, then they seem to be a force to be reckoned with.
Paris Saint-Germain, on the other hand, not the team we thought they would be before this split started. They're improving week on week, but still the same mistakes come up. The shot calling mid-game, the decisions that they make, their vision control, it all just seems a little bit haphazard.
It does.
Yep.
Honestly, it really does. Like the difficulty I'm having with PSG is the fact that they're 1, too slow on a lot of plays, and 2, like Pilot's just running in at the most random times. Week 1, I was thinking, okay, maybe it's not Pilot's fault. But there was a lot of symptomatic errors where Pilot's like, hey, everybody's dead. I'm gonna just run in.
Again, it's not to emphasize that he was the reason why they lost, but it is definitely a problem that they could look to rectify. More so, I do think that they need to solidify some way of deciding how these decisions are made, because it is a real problem when there are better options and you're picking the riskiest one.
I totally agree. Well, let's have a look at the standings at the conclusion of week 2 of the European Challenger Series. Schalke dominant in that first spot, 6 points for them. Fnatic Academy, Millennium, Misfits Academy, and Team Kinguin all tied for second place with 3 points, and Paris Saint-Germain bringing it up the rear, yet to get a point.
Come on, Aaron, you got to do it the real way it is. Schalke 04 2. Paris Saint-Germain 0.
Yep.
Got to do the old BBC voice.
But you can see it was a day of upsets, or it was supposed to be, if Paris Saint-Germain had continued their initial success. But the fact that we saw Team Kinguin come out with a 2-0 and Millennium come out with a 2-0 definitely strikes for a competitive Challenger Series here in Europe. But who would have thought that it would be PSG sitting at 0 points after the first week?
I don't think anyone predicted that at all. We do have more matches, of course, coming up next week. We start off with our reigning first place team, Schalke, playing up against Fnatic Academy. Then we have Millennium against Kinguin. And then PSG fighting against Misfits Academy to try and get away from the bottom of the table.
Oh, you give us this a week ago, Fnatic Academy Schalke? Oh, that would be such a hype matchup. But honestly, Schalke look like they're leagues above Fnatic Academy's performance today.
Well, I think Dan is still trying to find his feet in the roster. Clearly, Broxah was a big part of the original Challenger roster, and for a while, they'll have to find their feet. But I am excited to see how PSG does against Misfits Academy. Both seem to be struggling teams. Let's see how much growth they can make within the next week.
Definitely. Well, it's time to blow the full-time whistle on this broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We'll be back next week, Sunday, 3 p.m. Central European Time, as our coverage of the European Challenger Series continues. Good night. Here comes